Now, live from Whitney Media, 1460 WVOX, the Greenburgh Report, with Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner. You can join in the conversation at 914-636-0110. Now on 1460 WVOX, here's Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
Hi, I'm Paul Feiner. I'm the Greenburgh Town Supervisor, and we have a real treat today. My guest is Joe Queenan. Joe is a freelance satirist and a critic. He's written many books. I always read his columns in the Wall Street Journal. He's written for Spy Magazine, TV Guide, Movie Line, The Guardian, the New York Times Book Review. He's appeared on the Late Show with David Letterman, with Bill Maher, The Daily Show, Today, Good Morning America, Charlie Rose, Conan O'Brien. And with me today as co-host is Danielle Jacoby, who's an intern. And we're going to talk about Joe's career and also his take on some of the issues facing our community. Danielle, do you want to start with any questions?
Yeah, of course. So what we were just talking about a few minutes ago, looking at changing media, specifically that of newspapers, on a smaller scale, how would you say that social media and smaller media networks might change the viewpoints of younger people regarding their immediate community?
Well, I think the most obvious way it changes is that when you had newspapers, someone wrote a newspaper column, and then if someone disagreed with it, they wrote an angry letter to the editor, which might get published. And now people can respond to the things anyway. And they can also send the information to their friends. So in a certain sense, that's actually helping the news industry. However, I think one of the problems with social media is people are only interested in a limited range of topics. So they'll be interested in Trump. They'll be interested in what Adele is doing. They'll be interested in Taylor Swift's new record. What they won't be interested in are interest rates. They won't be interested in the city's floating a municipal bond issue. They won't be interested in school board meetings and things like that. And that's actually the stuff that local newspapers have always done really well, is just provide you with basic information about what's going on where you live. And that's a casualty of this whole new world of journalism.
How do you get all your ideas for the Wall Street Journal? I read all your columns, and they're so interesting.
They come out of the air. I mean, I always tell writers that the journalists look for stories, but people like me just have to be receptive to the environment. So you might say something today that will give me an idea for a story, but it probably won't be you saying, "Hey, Joe, I've got an idea for a story." It'll probably just be something you say, and I'll go, "Oh, that could be interesting." So, for example, last week, I read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Philadelphia Inquirer every day because I'm from Philadelphia. So I read all of those papers. And there was a story by the technology columnist for the Wall Street Journal about technologies that her 2-year-old son would not even know what they were. Like for us, it was like the 8-track or the Victrola or, the Conestoga wagon. If you looked at those things, it's like, did people really use those things? And she talked about things like oversized smartphones. They will disappear in the next few years. iPads, things like that will disappear. So she was talking about all these technologies that would disappear. And I just said, that's great that Alexa's here and Alexa makes it easier to listen to your music. How does technology address issues like the traffic on the Hutch coming over here? Is technology helping us with that? Is technology helping us with the fact that high school is insanely boring? Is technology helping us with the fact that, small businesses are disappearing? And it's like, people love to read stories about there's a new technology. New technologies mostly solve problems that don't exist, like having streaming music. That's great. It's no improvement sonically over CDs. CDs were no improvement over vinyl. So, you get a technology. Smartphone is an advance because then people do have information available to them. But the basic problems that society has, technology doesn't advance. I'll give you a perfect example. Technology has made baseball worse because now there's a play, there's a tag at second, and now they go to the review booth and they have to change it. That makes things worse.
So we have to take a break in a couple minutes, in a couple seconds, and we'll be back with Joe Queenan, who's a columnist, and I find that he has thoughts about almost everything. So we'll be right back with Danielle Jacoby.
WVOX.
That's my station.
Westchester Radio for you and yours. 1460 WVOX.
Now back to the Greenburgh Report on 1460 WVOX. Once again, here's Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
Hi, I'm Paul Feiner. I'm the Greenburgh Town Supervisor, and Danielle Jacoby is an intern in my office. Danielle, do you have a question?
Yeah, so saying you write a lot would probably be an understatement. Do you believe in the concept of writer's block or no?
I believe that there are writers who suffer from writer's block, but I don't happen to be one of them. I think that I know a lot of writers, and I won't mention them by name, but I have friends who are writers, who are very, very gifted writers, who hate writing, just hate it. They like the money, they like being famous, they like giving speeches, but they actually hate writing. And I just love writing. I physically love the act of writing. So I have never suffered from writer's block. The closest that I have ever suffered from writer's block is when you're stuck with a story that you just don't have any idea how to write the story. But when you become a freelance writer early in your career, never take an assignment unless you know that you can do it. If you have a bad feeling about something, then just do it. But I do think a lot of writers do suffer from writer's block.
When you write for the Wall Street Journal, do they tell you what to write, or could you go against their editorial policy? So
it's my idea.
So if you would write saying Obama and the Democrats are the greatest thing in the history of America, would they say we're a conservative publication?
No. Here's the thing about it is that I'm writing a humor column every other Saturday for the Wall Street Journal. Who wants to read another story about Trump? There's 75 stories about Trump. That's the whole point of writing a humor column is let's write about something else. When you open the New York Times, Gail Collins is writing about Trump. Maureen Dowd is writing about Trump. All the other columnists, Bret Stephens, they're all writing about Trump. Yeah, I think the subject's been covered. So write about something else. The whole point of satire is to make people look at the world in a different way.
When I read the op-ed pages of the Times, sometimes it seems like everybody just ganging up, about Trump and just being constantly negative. Do you think that backfires? Because I feel that the Times coverage is not a little, it's very, anti-Trump. I don't like Trump, but would the media be, if they really want to get rid of Trump, would they be better off almost ignoring him? But not ignoring it, not focusing on Trump, all the quirkiness and crazy things he's doing.
I don't know whether reporters deliberately ignore important subjects or whether they're not even aware of them. But to me, right now, can Trump be reelected? And it seems to me that obviously any other Republican president with the economy doing as well as it's been doing would be a shoo-in for reelection, without a doubt. Trump, it's going to be touch and go. I personally think that it's going to come down to one state, Wisconsin. I don't think the Democrats are going to lose any of the states that Hillary took, and I think they will win Pennsylvania and they will win Michigan. And let's say they ran Kamala Harris, they'll win those states, okay? Because the black vote did not come out in huge numbers in Pennsylvania and Michigan, and that's why they lost. So it could come down to Wisconsin or winning North Carolina instead of Wisconsin, or winning Arizona, or winning Georgia, or if possibly winning Florida, okay? So the key question is, what is going to keep Trump from winning? And the answer is, how do Republicans always get voted out of office? They wreck the economy. I mean, Herbert Hoover won a resounding victory in 1928. They wrecked the economy. He was voted out in 32, and the Democrats were in power forever. George Bush, after the first George Bush, 1992, he loses to Clinton. Why? The economy, we were in a recession, and we had an economic boom came, but it came too late for George Bush. Bush got voted out of office after one term. Obama got voted into office because the economy had been destroyed. It had been completely destroyed by the previous administration, with some help from the Democrats. But the press keeps harping on, he's a bad man. He needs to go. Republicans do not get voted out of office because they do bad things. They get voted out of office because we go into recessions. That's the reason they get voted out of office. So the conversation about, he did this, and this, of all the things that he's done, the McCain thing, I don't want the McCain ship there. That's terrible. That's tacky. That's not going to affect the election. What could affect the election is you slap a 5% tariff on the Mexicans, okay? And then it affects everybody in those border states. It affects all. The Mexican economy and the American economy are so interconnected that if you're in the car industry, those parts are coming from Mexico. The avocados are coming from Mexico. The people who work in your fields are coming from Mexico. You put a 5% tariff on Mexican goods, and you see what happens. The stock market starts to go. And that's the point that Republicans don't understand, I think, is that McConnell loves Trump because he can appoint all these justices, conservative justices, young people who will be there for life. He loves that. He loves the fact that Trump cut taxes. He loves the fact that Trump is against Obamacare. All those things are great. But then Trump does the tariff thing, and people like McConnell are going, no, you can't do that. And Grassley are like, no, you can't do that. And what they don't understand is you guys can't control him. You think he's your puppet. He cannot be controlled. He is a really unusual person who will do what he wants to do, and you can't control him. When Kelly was there, when all the other people were there to sort of keep things under control, make sure that Trump didn't get out of control. All those people are gone now. So now he's surrounded by his handpicked people. He's surrounded by economists who agree with his policies. He's surrounded by Bolton, who's very, 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 firebrand. The mainstream Republican Party cannot control Donald Trump. And they're finding out if the tariffs backfire, if we have a recession next year because you lost control of the House of Representatives and you can't cut taxes again to juice the economy, they're going to find out the hard way. They can't control him.
So do you think if it was 50 years ago and the media wasn't as prevalent, Trump's ratings would be the same?
Let's not say 50 years ago. Let's go back to Harding, okay? Because Harding's the closest parallel to Trump. The Harding administration was completely corrupt, but the stock market was booming, so nobody cared. It's the Trump administration. Trump administration is completely corrupt. Stock market is booming. The American people, it's really interesting. You go back almost 100 years. Those things haven't changed at all.
Right. We have to take another break, and we'll be back. And my co-host is Danielle Jacoby, and our guest is Joe Queenan. And he's a writer for the Wall Street Journal, many other publications, and has views on practically everything. So we'll be back in a couple minutes. I'm Paul Feiner, Town Supervisor.
WVOX. Now back to the Greenburgh Report on 1460 WVOX. Once again, here's Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
Hi, I'm Paul Feiner, the Greenburgh Town Supervisor. And one of the articles that you wrote a couple months ago that I really enjoyed was robots will end up goofing off like the rest of us.
Yes.
Do you remember that article?
Yeah, of course.
And could you just tell us a little bit about why we shouldn't be afraid?
Well, the basic premise of that story was that robots are good for doing repetitive work that's boring, like working in a factory, which is basically boring work. So robots can easily replace people, but robots are smart. So it seems to me that robots quickly will figure out how boring work is. So they'll just be like watching porn on the internet like every other, guy. Or they'll be playing Tetris, or they'll be watching reruns of Games of Thrones, or they'll just be figuring out ways at work to waste time, which is what an awful lot of people do. Because one of the things that's interesting about the internet is the internet has not made people more productive, because it's like a big toy that you have. You have a toy on your desk, and you can play with it all day, and you can do a lot of stuff that's not essential to your job. So it seems to me that robots would they would figure out pretty quickly that work is boring, and then they would just stop doing it. And one of the things that was interesting when I was doing that story was my editor said, well, you can't say that everybody thinks their job is boring. And I said, you're right. So I said, I have personally known two people in my life who like their job. My mother, who ran the Medicare desk at Germantown Hospital in Philadelphia, she really liked her job because she'd been out of the workforce for many years raising children. And when she got back to work, she just loved it. And the other was Chuck Berry. I met Chuck Berry when I was 17, and I basically said, do you still like doing this? He goes, yeah, I do it for nothing. Those are the only two people.
I would do my job for nothing also. I like it, but because it's always interesting, and I haven't been bored like 1 second.
But I think it's generally true that, here's the thing that I think is generally true about work, which is why I haven't had a job in 30 years. Lots of people like their job, but a moment will come when they won't like it anymore. And they won't like it either because they get tired of doing the same thing or because their boss changes.
Or they get challenged. And
no, I don't think challenging the thing. I think it's more like you get a new boss. A new boss comes in and changes things, and then you don't like your job anymore. But just about everybody that I've ever known at a certain point got sick of what they were doing.
That's inspiring. I wanted to ask a question. Danielle, what school are you going to be going to?
I will be attending the College of William and Mary in the fall.
Okay, and I went to Fordham, and what's the difference between her future path and my education?
She's already on a launch pad that can take her further. And I mean, you've done really well, of course, but like I was saying earlier, I went to St. Joe's in Philadelphia, and St. Joe's is basically Fordham. The good Catholic schools, most of the people who go to them are local, certainly mostly in the Northeast. And the schools like that produce people who run cities or counties, in your case.
Right.
Yeah. Schools like St. Joe's and Fordham don't produce people like me. I'm an anomaly. St. Joe's is not supposed to produce freelance satirists. It's supposed to produce people who run like Blue Cross of Pennsylvania, or who run the school board, or who do things like that. But if you go to one of the top schools, like William and Mary is an example, you're supposed to be sort of thinking more nationally, I think.
Do you think it's the schools that are bringing the people to these high places, or it's the people who end up at the schools that are doing it themselves?
The people who end up at good schools, by and large, they're not necessarily smarter than everybody that they went to school with, but they're probably more ruthless. And I don't mean ruthless in a really negative way, but like my daughter went to Harvard, and now she works at Harvard and runs a program. My daughter has a kind of ruthless quality to her. And I think that that's generally true of people who go to the top schools, is those kids figure out really early in life, like in third grade, how to get ahead. They just know how to get ahead. They know how to solve problems. They know how to get from point A to point B. They know how to make friendships with the right people. They know they listen when people give advice, and that's how they get ahead.
Did you always have successes your whole life, or any failures?
definitely not all successes. I mean, I was very lucky to have attended a very, very good public school growing up, so I have to give them a lot of credit for putting me where I am, because not everyone obviously starts at such a good place, so it's much harder to get into colleges depending on where you go to school when you're younger.
If you were giving...
I just want to add one thing to that. My daughter went to public school. She went to Tarrytown. I think that's one of the reasons she got into Harvard, was because schools look at, there's 1 million kids going to Hackley or, one of these private schools. They got 1 million of them, 1 million Brittany's and 1 million Courtney's. They're looking for people who went to the public schools because they want to have more of a mix. And I think that gives a person a certain advantage when they're applying to schools. People say, oh, you went to public school. That's great.
If you were giving advice to somebody who would like to be your successor in 20 years or whatever, what advice would you give somebody who wants to do freelance, journalism, write columns, be a commentator?
Forget it. It's done. That's over. The internet has destroyed that. I'm a dinosaur. I'm like those cowboys at the end of the Wild Bunch. You're done. It's done. You could not support yourself for 30 years as a freelance writer the way I have, because the money's just not there. When I started freelancing, I was writing stories for places like GQ, okay? GQ would have issues that were 650 pages because there was so much advertising. There was so much money. There's just money was being thrown at you all the time. And that's all done because of the internet. All that advertising is done. So if you were a young person now and you wanted to be a satirist, go to work in television.
What about being a journalist?
Something that I think is really interesting about journalism now is journalism originally was a blue-collar profession. So it was filled with people who didn't write that well, but they were dogged. They liked to find out, what the criminals were doing, and they liked to dig, and they liked to hang out in bars. And now the journalism profession has been taken over by people who go to Ivy League schools. So there's this kind of like dainty quality to it. It's like, I think most people who become journalists now do it because they think it's kind of nice, gives you a certain kind of status, but they're not diggers. They don't like to leave the office. So I think that it's a completely different profession than it was when I started out in it.
That's great, Danielle. Do you have another question?
Yeah. So what profession, if you were starting your career in the media that we have today, what do you think you would have pursued as a career?
Screenwriting, probably. Because for right now, Netflix makes 700 TV shows or movies every year. 700. Think about that. I actually wrote a story about how Netflix is ruining economic productivity, because productivity is flat, and it's been flat for a long time. And I think the reason is people are binge watching, Game of Thrones. There's so much money out there, and that would just be the obvious place to go. It used to be you would go to work in the movies. Now I think you would go to work. You would work in the movies, but you would work for Netflix or one of those places, HBO. But I think if you were funny and you were starting out, that would be where you would go, I think.
You also, besides being a commentator, you're been writing plays, and I saw one of your plays recently.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I had a friend who is highly ranked person. He's the chief learning officer or chief knowledge officer at Educational Testing Service. And he started out as a playwright and an actor. And then in his early 30s, it was very difficult. So he stopped and he had a different career and became very, very successful. And one day a few years ago, I said to him, you're getting ready to retire or you're getting close to retire. Why don't you go back to the theater? And I was thinking more in terms of like getting involved with community theater or something like that. But he wasn't going to do that. So he said, can we write some plays together? So we started writing plays. And I said to him, let's write a play that in 75 minutes explains the history of the Catholic Church.
That's great. We could talk about that after the break. And I'm Paul Feiner, and Danielle will be right back in a couple minutes with Joe Queenan. Thanks.
1460 WVOX.
Now, back to the Greenburgh Report on 1460 WVOX. Once again, here's Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
Hi, I'm Paul Feiner, Greenburgh Town Supervisor. I saw a great show, and actually it was written by you. Co-written by you. So maybe we could just spend a minute or so talking about it?
Yeah. Well, my friend TJ and I are both Catholics. He's more Catholic than I am, but I only went to Catholic schools. I was in the seminary for a year. And I'm the sort of Catholic who, I don't go to church all the time, but like if I'm in a town I don't know, I'll immediately go to the Catholic Church just to see it. So I'm rooted. Catholicism is what I am. Okay, I'm a Catholic. So we wanted to write a play that explains why people remain Catholics no matter what. No matter what happens, people remain Catholics, and that's basically what the play is about.
How long did it take you to write the play?
I think it took us about 6 months.
And I know the show was being performed for a couple days.
4 nights.
4 nights.
Yeah.
Is it going to be performed again?
Yeah, I think so. We're that's what we're doing now. We're going to cut it a little. I think it's still a little bit too long, and then we're going to see if we can get some money to put it on. And then we're doing these other plays. But if it was up to me, I would concentrate on this play, on making this play as good as it can be. It's going to be hard to write a better play than this.
I had a question. When you write a column in the Wall Street Journal, millions of people will read it.
Right.
When you write a show on Broadway, you could be spending more, off Broadway, you could spend many more hours on a play, and you're talking about less than, say, 1,000 people or 2,000 people will say, is that something that gets you aggravated or?
No, it's fun. Oh my God, it's so much fun. When you write a column, you don't hear people laughing. Your response might be, people might make comments or something like that, or somebody might come up to you and say, I really liked your column. But when you write a play, you hear people laughing. So that's great. The other thing that's great is, look, the roar of the smell of the grease paint, the roar of the crowd is really true. If you become involved in the theater, it's fun. It's hard work. And it's economically disastrous. Like, you don't make any money doing this kind of stuff. But one of the things that I really liked about working with plays is I'm 68 years old. When do 68-year-old people have any interaction with young people other than their children? You don't. You don't. But when you're in a theater, you do. So all of a sudden, you're at the bar after the play, and you're hanging out with young people, and you're hearing their stories, and it's exciting. It's exciting to be around young people in the theater because you realize they will do anything to make it. Anything.
What about, you've written, I think, at least 9 books, right?
Yes.
And the books don't have the same readership, say, as a Wall Street Journal, or when you've written for Forbes or Barron's. What motivates you to write? What motivates somebody to want to write a book that's not going to get the same readership as a major magazine or a newspaper?
Money.
That's a good sign. I was just sort of curious. I've always, but not everybody.
Dickens said, anybody who writes and doesn't, anybody who thinks about writing and doesn't think about money, it's crazy.
But a lot of people write books and nobody reads them. You're lucky that they read your books.
Yeah, but also writing books is great because then, look, last year I got a box delivered to my house, and I thought it was some stupid thing or other, so I didn't open it. And then about a week later I opened it, and it was books that had come from Korea. And they were Korean translations of one of my books. That's fun. And so I would show that to friends, and they would say, how much money do you make? It's like, that's not what this is about. This is about you woke up in the morning and you had a bunch of books from Korea. I grew up in a housing project. People who grow up in housing projects don't get their books translated into Korean. And then my daughter shows up, and one of her best friends is Korean, and she starts reading the book, okay? That's great. That's what, you should never lose sight of that fact. You should never lose sight of the fact that it's exciting. Okay, let me tell you a story. A few years ago, my son went to Franklin and Marshall, which is a very nice school in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I was invited to talk to a group of kids who were journalism majors. So they asked me to talk and I came and I talked, and afterwards, my son said, you know, you didn't talk about what it was like to be a journalist. All you talked about was how much fun it was to be a journalist. All you did was tell stories about, oh, I was in the set of Die Hard 2, oh, I was out in Australia, oh, I was in a cemetery. All you did was talk about how exhilarating and thrilling and fun it was. Whereas the people who run those programs expect you to say, like, well, how do you start in the morning? You know, do you use the pencil? You know, do you use manila? And it's like, no. Everything about being a freelance writer it's thrilling.
That's great. Danielle, do you have a question?
Yeah, so in looking at the different types of writing you've done, obviously they're very different. Do you think that writing books is in a way more rewarding than writing columns, let's say, for the Wall Street Journal?
You know, I don't know, because you write a column for the Wall Street Journal or the Guardian or whatever, and basically it's here today, gone tomorrow. But you reach a lot of people. You do reach a lot of people. I wrote a story when Heath Ledger died a few years ago, and people talk to me about that story all the time. People come up to me and talk to it because it was about how it's heartbreaking when a young movie star dies. Because when a young movie star comes out, when you first see somebody for the first time, like Johnny Depp when he starts his career, or Angelina Jolie, or any number of people, Jennifer Lawrence is a perfect example. The thing that's great about a young movie star is they're going to be part of our lives for 40 years. We're going to be watching them for 40 years. You know, I just went to see John Wick 3 for like twice, okay? I interviewed Keanu Reeves when he was 21 years old. Keanu Reeves now is about 52 or 53, okay? Keanu Reeves is going to be part of my life forever. And I go to see all his movies, and it's great. That's the great thing about movies. Heath Ledger died when he was like 25 or 26 years old. It's devastating. It's horrible. It's horrible that James Dean died that young. It's horrible that Marilyn Monroe died that young. So I wrote that story. People still talk to me about that story.
But the nice thing about the Wall Street Journal is there's so many human interest stories, and you think, gosh, this is something that I really never really thought of. And yeah, I just love the paper. I'll save the paper and I'll read it sometimes 3 months later if I don't get to it. Yeah, I will never throw out the paper, that publication. I had a question in terms of presidential elections. What's your prediction?
You know, I wish that there was somebody like David Axelrod who you could talk to off the record, and they would break it down for you and say, this person has no chance, this person has no, de Blasio has no chance, waste of time. Most of the people running are running because it'll get you up, it'll get you a gig on Fox News. Or on CNN. You'll sell books, make you more famous. They're running for entirely cynical reasons. They have no chance. It's a waste of time. It's a joke. It would be as if somebody who was like 5'2" said, I want to play for the Golden State Warriors. It's like you don't have the minimal skills needed, so you're wasting everybody's time. So I think that there's a few candidates who have a legitimate chance. Obviously,
who do you think they are?
Biden. I think Harris. I really do think an African-American woman has a good chance, particularly if we have an economic downturn next year. She can win Pennsylvania, she can win Michigan, and then it comes down to Wisconsin. I don't think Warren has a chance. I think a lot of people just find her annoying, in the same way that Hillary was annoying, is that she sort of talks down to you, but she's probably the most interesting in terms of what she's putting out there. I don't think the one for
the mayor.
Yeah, he's not going to make it. But it's great that he's running, and it's great that he's talking about his military service and everything like that.
Could he be in the cabinet?
I don't know, but I do know that the number of people who are running is tiny. The people who are running who have a chance is tiny. It's not what we think. And it's not inconceivable that somebody else could show up. And, if Michelle Obama runs, she wins.
You think she has a real chance of winning even if there's no radical change in the economy?
Yeah, Michelle Obama would win. She makes Americans feel good about themselves. She is the exact opposite of Donald Trump. She makes you feel good to be an American. Donald Trump makes you feel, well, it depends on your view, but if you're a Democrat, it makes your skin crawl. He's president of the United States.
Like, and everybody could relate to her. Like, I think Biden, people could relate to the fact that he's empathetic, but Michelle Obama makes everybody smile, and you think she is...
Michelle Obama is not a developer. I mean, developer is probably the worst word you can use to describe any human being.
We're unfortunately running out of time. I'm really grateful that you joined us today. You're always
fun.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Paul Feiner, Greenburgh Town Supervisor, and now that you told me that Danielle's going to school and is going to be running the country, now I'll have to change my resume. And so thanks a lot. I'm Paul Feiner, Greenburgh Town Supervisor. Thank you, Danielle, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.